Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and yes, yeah, that's right, you read the title of what I'm reviewing. Yeah, I don't know, I don't know, it was just something about this, Netflix series that just, caught my attention. I was like, what the heck, I'll give it a watch, and I did. I watched all two seasons. I watched the 2 seasons of this show that I'm reviewing, which being called The End of the Effin' World. Yes, so this was a pretty interesting Netflix series, and also BBC being involved in this, yes, and distributing this as well. It was, again, as I'm gonna keep saying throughout this review, it was an interesting series. Because it ran for 2 seasons. Season 1 was in 2017, and then 2 years later, in 2019, we had Season 2, which, that was pretty clever because of the gap and, like, what's happening in the story, because Season 2 is set 2 years after the events of Season 1. Our 2 main characters, Alyssa, played by Jessica Barden, and James, played by Alex Lothar. Now, I recall Alex Lothar was, I remember he was best known for, say, playing young Eric in X-Men First Class. So he was the new kid actor at that time who was the new, younger Eric, and which, X-Men First Class reenacting, like, the opening scene of, young Eric when, using his powers, in the first X-Men film. And Jessica Barden, probably, say, best known for, say, in that movie Hannah, that was in 2011. But anyways, so yeah. This was, I think these 2 were pretty good. Like, these 2 actors playing these 2 characters, I should say, Alyssa and James, they were pretty good. Like, their personalities, their motivation, especially Alyssa, sometimes just have a dead kind of face or whatever, but sometimes I like this, they show emotion, especially, for James, but for Alyssa, sometimes she just have a frown on her face, or just stuff like that, or, I also kind of like it when, at times, when, mentioning, someone had died, or whatever, mostly, and especially for Alyssa, what she would normally say when, mentioning, an accident or someone had died, just be, pardon my French, shit. Yeah, that's all she says. That's what she mostly says in response. So, but yeah, so Jessica Barden, she was pretty good as Alyssa. And again, for Alex Lothar as well, he was good as James. In season 1, how they first meet is just crazy, when they meet at high school, and when, they just had about enough with their family, their parents, and they leave, they leave town, they get in a car, and, even at one point, because, well, what's interesting is, okay, there are flashbacks to this, visions, and there's also narration to it, sometimes, once in a while, you'd have, most of the time, I should say, you'd have either Alyssa or James, talking in their minds, Oh, man. And, yeah, I think that, and I will admit, there were some pretty funny moments in the show, of course, and because, for one thing about this series is dark comedy, so yeah. And because, bloody violence or whatever, some of it was okay, I mean, it didn't really bother me, just saying. For one thing, they break into somebody's house, in which it turns out to be a professor named Clive Koch, played by Jonathan Aris, and apparently we find out that this professor has, raped and murdered women, and he was this close to doing so with Alyssa, but of course James, stepped in and, the thing is earlier, James was going to kill Alyssa, but then, he instead wound up killing Professor Clive, and, they, try to get rid of the evidence that they did this, and, the cops wouldn't really understand. But I'm sure as though, yeah, eventually they do, and especially in Season 2. And one thing is, well, we find out about Alyssa that her father, her actual, blood father had left, And when they do find her father, he seems like he's okay and he's a great father, but it turns out he's not really. In fact, he even called 911 on his own daughter, and including, his, supposed boyfriend, James, even though they weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, technically. And just, at the end of season 1, they, the cops get them, and it wouldn't be until we'd had, people who had watched the show had to wait for season 2, 2 years later, and yeah, like, the aftermath of what happened with them, boy, they got that off. They got out of that pretty, like, that escalated quickly for them. Like, they weren't found guilty or anything like that. Alyssa and James, they went their separate ways, and in fact, Alyssa's mother, Gwen, played by Christine, does it show the last name? Like, I'm trying to, yeah, Christine Bottomley? Bottomley? I think that's how you say it, yeah, Christine Bottomley, had James write a letter to Alyssa, that, couldn't be together and he was leaving Alyssa, and then Alyssa found this, like, new guy, and she suggested to him, like, they should get married, and they do, actually, but then at one point, Alyssa had, left and caught up with James again. Well, like, they caught up with each other, they met each other before she got married. And in season 2, a new main, character comes in by the name of Bonnie, played by Naomi Ackie. I think I said that right, yeah. And she's probably best known for, say, being in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, being Janna. Yeah, and, like, her and others, they were, like, riding those, like, horses, So anyways, yeah. One thing about the character of Bonnie as well, she had a relationship with the professor, and she's out to get Alyssa and James, who she believes that, they killed him, but although, of course they did, but only because, well, he was going to rape Alyssa, so, and she refuses to believe that what he really is, etc. In fact, she did at one point, because of a flashback scene of Bonnie, she does notice that, well, there was another woman in his house, bleh, and is just, I guess, furious over this, and, like, she gets in her car and catches up with her, like, as she's jogging, and runs over her, like, drives fast and just kills her, and she winds up in jail. She receives a letter that, well, the professor was killed, and of course she does find out that it was them, Alyssa and James, but really it was James that killed Alyssa, saving Alyssa, of course. And, like, another thing is, James's father, Phil, played by Stephen Oram, I think I said that right, like, he at one point, when they're, like, back together and they're bowling and such, his dad has a freaking heart attack. And did I forget to mention that what happened to James's mother was that, they drove and, like, went to go feed the ducks, and she told her son that, she loves him, and when he got out of the car to feed the ducks, I guess, yeah, she started her car and just, like, freaking drove into the river, into the water, and just letting herself drown. Wow, like, man, talk about super depressed. Yeah, well, I mean, that was unexpected for me, like, just, really? Like, wow, just, no hard feelings, just, don't want to be, you understand. And so, yeah, it's very sad for James. And, well, first he lost his mother, and then he lost his father. His mother died from drowning, and his father died from a heart attack. Yeah, and afterwards, like, James has his father's remains. And at one point, their car got towed when they went to stop and eat, and they try to get the car back, like, for one thing, like, retrieve James's father. But then, later on, like, they wait until, like, say, that car place, is closed, and they would break in and get the car. And, when Alyssa tells James, to wake her up, when it's time, and James kind of, like, puts his jacket over her, like, to warm her, and, like, he does say that to her, like, thinking that she's asleep, I love you, and, and of course they get the car back, etc., and they eventually, of course, meet up with Bonnie. They stop at a hotel, and the guy running the hotel, at one point is accidentally is that, like, Bonnie accidentally kills the hotel manager, you know, the guy running the hotel. Even when, like, say, when James and Alyssa, they were, like, as they were about to kiss, etc. And later on, because, well, they leave Bonnie behind at some point, like, when they go to a restaurant. And also, yeah, that's when, like, later on, Bonnie goes, like, you know, finds Alyssa again, and, you know, when James shows up, well, James finds out at first that Bonnie's about going to kill Alyssa, and then, you know, when James comes in, like, well, Bonnie has both Alyssa and James right where she wants them, like, you know, at gunpoint. And even, like, say, when one cop showed up and, you know, Alyssa was trying to write a note to the policeman, and it seems as though the policeman figured out what was going on and that, you know, Bonnie had a gun. So, yeah. I didn't quite notice that, like, if you did notice the gun. I don't know if you know what I'm saying. But, yeah. But at one point, I couldn't believe this, but thank goodness, like, well, it was just, like, Bonnie was just daydreaming. She actually does kill Alyssa and James. But it turns out that it was just a daydream, like, she was daydreaming, etc. And then she was almost about to kill herself, but Alyssa and James stops her. And then in the final episode of season 2, in episode 8, you know, and in the last episodes, episode 7, that was the last we see of Bonnie. Like, well, we don't know what happens to her. It was never confirmed in the final episode. But what does happen is, well, Alyssa kind of runs away or just goes somewhere, like, you know, goes to different places. And in that episode, like, well, we start seeing, like, flashbacks of, like, what we've been seeing, like, you know, season 1 and season 2, and when James tries to go find Alyssa, and that's when they go back to where the house that they were in, and when the infamous, like, murder, like, you know, of Professor Clive, and when, you know, Alyssa feels that, you know, that the house is haunted, and she says in her mind, you know, she's the ghost, you know, and at one point, like, she goes for a swim in like the pool. And when James finally, you know, finds Alyssa at that house, well, that's and earlier in that episode, like, apparently, like, Alyssa left a note for James, and it freaked him out because he thought that she was going to do something bad. And of course, Alyssa told James that no, she wasn't really. That's not what it meant. And the epilogue, like some of the final scenes where at one point they do finally scatter James's father, but oh my gosh, James's father is like, his remains are wet and mushy. God, that's horrible. But the final scene, they're at like this picnic bench, well, picnic table, I should say, and Alyssa does tell James that, you know, she was awake and she heard James at one point say that he loves her, and she feels the same way, and that's very sweet. And it had a very nice, happy ending to it. They're, like, officially, finally together, you know? And that's another thing. Throughout the show, you know, it really showed that they were meant to be. For sure. So, yeah. And again, the ending to it was a very happy and sweet ending, for sure. And it's very interesting that this is that there are only 2 seasons, you know? Like, it wouldn't have hurt for maybe a season 3 or 4, but I don't know. That's just the way the show is, and for us, for this show just getting 2 seasons, okay? And another thing is, I'm surprised because sometimes the episodes would be like, say, 22 minutes, but they would also be 19 minutes. Wow. Just imagine, like, an episode that's 19 minutes. Wow. Just, I don't know. But anyways, so I will say, The End of the Effing World was an interesting Netflix series. I surprisingly thought it was not that bad, and I found it enjoyable, and I did laugh at some stuff. You know, it had some funny moments. And boy, how do I rate this? Well, I think, yeah, like, I was thinking, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 7 out of 10 stars. You know, 7 out of 10 stars for The End of the Effing World. And you guys let me know what you think of the series, you know, if you've seen it, what you thought of my review. Leave comments and give this review a like as always. So again, with all that being said, 7 out of 10 stars for The End of the Effing World. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of The End of the Effing World. More reviews coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. Take care, and peace out.